Hey, Roger here. Our biggest online event of the year is about to happen where we take a volunteer, put them in the hot seat, build the retirement plan on air, and then share the results with you live. This is all coming soon, and you can register for Retirement Plan Live at livewithroger.com. Well, welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am so glad you're here. This show is dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but rock retirement. I believe you can. I know you can. So the last few weeks, we've been talking with Trish in this Retirement Plan Live series, and this is the last show of the series. Tomorrow, we have the live results meetup where Trish and I are going to be there live with over 500 or 600 of people just like you. And together, we're going to walk through, I'll share my screen, what their goals are, what their resources are, and we're going to play around with, can they achieve all these goals that they dreamed up? And they dreamed up a lot if you listen to that episode. And we're going to look at whether it's feasible and play around with what risks and or opportunities can we identify to create a feasible plan or one that's more focused on the things that are most important to them. So I'm excited about that. You're going to have the chance to ask questions and I'll facilitate. We'll use this as a case study so maybe you can improve your journey a little bit. Now, before we get started, also next month on the show, the entire month is going to be dedicated to how to stay physically healthy in retirement. So whether you're approaching retirement or in retirement, as we get older, and I just had a birthday last week, so trust me, I feel this. As we get older, our body changes. Did you know that? Yeah, it does. And this vessel that we have is what we need to use to do all the cool things that we want to do. So how can we be intentional about making it as healthy as possible? Doesn't mean we have to be who we were when we're 30, as much as I would love to be that physically. It means wherever we're at, how do we take intentional action to be healthy so we can preserve our time and energy to express all these values that we have. But for now, let's go to the What's That Mean segment and talk about identity.
Huh?
What does that mean?
Identity encompasses everything about you, your memories, your experiences, your values, your relationship, and all together, they get into this big pot and create who you are. And identity changes over time. We know of some big changes in identity, which are pivot points in life. I can think of like high school to college, because high school is like identity central, right? We're becoming adults and trying to figure out where we fit in and quote unquote, who we are. That's why we had the jocks and the nerds and the geeks and so forth. In our Rock Retirement Club, we have the Spreadsheet Geek Club where that's part of their identity. They love to geek out on spreadsheets, and they even have t-shirts and stickers to represent who they are. I love the Spreadsheet Geeks in the Rock Retirement Club. And in high school, I remember when I was trying to figure out what my identity was, who I was not one to join groups. I remember that. I was in athletics. I debated, or I wrestled, and I played baseball, and I played football for a while. But I also was on the debate team. I would walk around the high school halls wearing earrings on my t-shirts. I don't know what that was all about, but I was trying to symbolize who I was. Maybe for me, it thought I was unique. But we're trying to figure out what our identity is in high school. And then what happens, that pivot point when you go to college, you leave the high school and you go into this whole new universe, and you basically have to reestablish your identity. You've come into a little bit more adulthood, and you get to start with a fresh slate. You can join new groups. You can do new activities, and you start to reform the identity outside of high school. And then the next pivot point is the obvious. You go from college to your career, and now you get to reestablish this identity of who you are as a professional adult. These are natural pivot points. High school, college, work. Well, fast forward a little bit, retirement is another natural pivot point where you shed a lot of the identity that you created over decades of VP, CEO, the go-to person, the person that has the answer to everything or knows where everything is. And much like we talked about that reward system a few weeks ago in goals, when you get to retirement and you leave work, if you haven't spent enough time creating your identity outside of work, it can feel really scary. Sometimes make us work longer than we really intended to because we're afraid to figure out who we are, or we feel like we're losing ourselves. I think I've heard some of this through Trish's language over the last 3 or 4 weeks because it happened so suddenly. She was still working on who Trish in retirement was going to be, and then this was thrust upon her because she worked at the same company for almost 3 decades. And so we're going to have a conversation with Trish on this here in a second because I think we need to address it. We're not going to solve anything, but it would be helpful to have a framework for, just like it would be for you. This is one reason why in the Rock Retirement Club, we're creating an entire masterclass on creating a non-financial plan to partly deal with all the things identity-wise that you lose through work. So with that, let's go have a chat with Trish on this other side of retirement. So I do a really horrible job talking about this. So when I talk about the Rock Retirement Club, this is an online community, over 450 people that are all in the same season of life. And not only do they get to help each other through online meetups and coaching from myself and others on my team, but we also have this retirement masterclass that walks you through step by step, totally self-driven, where you get world-class education on how to rock retirement from the financial side, and then coming a little bit later this quarter on the non-financial side. And you can learn all about it because the club is open to new members, assuming they have the right spirit and they're in this stage of life. And you can learn all about it at rockretirementclub.com. So you can check that out there. Now with that, let's go chat with Trish about identity and these non-financial stuff. Howdy, Trish.
Hello.
So today we're going to talk about non-money things because a lot has happened in 2020 and now it's 2021, but you had a pretty crazy year last year. And one thing that rang to me, especially in our first conversation, was some non-financial stuff of you were not very happy about how this all played out.
That is correct.
I think I recall a phrase of part of looking for another job is that I'm going to show them. And you had this plan to 55 and it just got derailed. The word that comes to mind is hostility, but I don't know if that's the appropriate word. Am I right?
It might be hostility. Yeah, I think it is. Yes, absolutely.
Is it just directed at the company or just in the situation that you find yourself in?
The company. Yeah, the company. You pour your life and soul into the company and you feel like you didn't get returned.
And you had been there, if I recall, 29 years.
Correct.
And company culture tends to talk about family and team and we're all in this together, right? That's the normal communication from company. So it makes you feel that way. And you'd been there forever.
Right.
And then family doesn't kick you out without much notice, or the team doesn't leave anybody behind necessarily. And that's sort of the new social contract that was blown up decades ago, where it wasn't a job for life. Part of it, you sort of felt that it was a job for life.
Oh, yeah. And I think that Company X was unique in that it still had that old culture where you worked there for life and you could go around with other companies, go around the room and name the tenure. And Company X's tenure was 30, 40 years. I mean, that was typical. So it's definitely changing, but I thought that I would be able to retire at 55 from that company. So,
and did they couch it as the extreme times of COVID and the market was the reason?
Yes, that's how they introduced it. But also, as I'm now looking for jobs out there, they're still posting for jobs.
So I was going to ask that. Did they even entertain the idea of lateral movements to other roles to keep you within the company?
They said they would look for opportunities that you may be another fit for, but they couldn't find any. So now looking for jobs, though, they are
looking for things that you could have
hiring.
done.
Yeah. And it might have been a demotion, but at this point, that probably would have been okay.
Well, and that's sort of part of that whole family team culture is demotion. I don't know if that's a really great term, but lateral to down, because all costs we try to keep everybody on the boat.
Right.
Right. Even if it's not the ideal situation. I can understand that, especially because of the culture of the company, and you were institutionalized was I think the term I came up with. And so now you're out of the boat. What do you feel like you're dealing with? I mean, how are you going to deal with the anger part of it?
Yeah. And so as time goes on, of course, you start looking at it differently. And at first, I'm going to go out and get a bigger and better job, and I'm going to prove to those people that they made the wrong decision. And now I go back and forth. Sometimes I think, you know what, just get something that can get me through. I had a severance package. You know, I was fortunate enough to get a severance package. So really, how much do I really need? And, you know, relax. You had a good career. So I feel all the emotions.
And so what does your wife think? How has she counseled you through some of this?
She's as angry as I am because she was there the whole time, the 29 years as well. She went to the Christmas parties, to the picnics, to, you know, everything. So it was very much a part of both of our lives. So she's as angry as I am and devastated. She's going to hold on for at least maybe 2 to 3 more years. So we need to stay in the area. So her reaction is just get something to get you by, to keep you busy, to get you in a better mood, probably.
I think of it like a current. You had this forward momentum and you were almost to the shore of leaving work. And now I imagine it feels like you're sort of dead in the water.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a comfortable feeling.
No, not at all.
And so outside of the feeling of betrayal, what are you going to do every day? Because you had a routine. Your whole life was set up around your routine, I assume.
Absolutely. And so what my routine is now, and this is institutionalized for sure, I get up the same time. I get dressed. For some reason, I get my shoes on because I think I can't work without putting my shoes on. And I go up and go into my home office, if you will, and look for jobs from 8 to 5 every day. So it's hard for me to go to the store at 10 a.m. in the morning because I'm not used to doing that and having that freedom. So
full disclosure, right now, I do not have shoes on.
I don't either right now.
Oh, all right. See, you're coming out.
I am coming out. Yep.
And so you treat it like a normal work day.
Yes.
And you have one project.
Right. Find a job.
That's a long time every day to look for a job.
It is.
And you don't have any of the social interaction.
No.
Have you talked to any former colleagues?
I do occasionally. Yes. And some are in the same boat as I am, and they're just as frustrated and angry. And some have taken much lesser jobs to get through. Yeah. So we kind of have our little support system, but it's not much interaction throughout the day for sure.
So you're keeping your routine. I remember babies, they love their routines. If they miss their nap, they're pretty grumpy. I think humans love their routines. It gives them a sense of where they're at, right?
Right.
And then you've lost the social aspect of it. And I guess right now you have a purpose, and in your mind, it's to find a job to get you through, to use your words.
Right.
What if you don't need a job? What if we discover in our process that you could actually just not work?
I think maybe I would relax a little bit, which might be a good thing, because I fear sometimes that desperation or maybe anger comes through sometimes during interviews or conversations that I have for new potential jobs. So I do think maybe I could have a little bit more fun with looking for something if I didn't feel like I needed to get something.
So right now, a lot of this is, to go back to the water analogy, you feel like financially your head is not quite above water, so you better get a job quickly. Is that sort of the mentality, you think?
And I'm not sure if that's the case really, but it's just not having a regular paycheck coming in that is such a change for me that scares me.
And you were planning on it, but it all got accelerated much quicker than you ever expected. And that's
correct.
The shock.
Right.
Well, we're going to determine that for sure, because without the perspective, it feels like I better keep my head above water as quick as and grab anything I can almost.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense. So if we assume for a second that we get the perspective that you need to work a year or two, but you're treading water just fine to sort of gain your equilibrium after this event. Would that help? You didn't have to get a job right away?
Yeah, I think it would. I also don't know how much pressure there is of having a hole in your resume, be it 6 months, 12 months. What does your next employer think when they see that hole?
Yeah.
So there's that fear.
Because the official date of the hole began, that edge of the hole was what date?
October 30th.
Okay. So we're not even in a quarter yet. We're right at the end of the first quarter here, end of January. Mm-hmm. So there's that concern. You feel like every day that goes by, that ticks and that shovels more dirt out of the hole, and it just gets bigger, and people are going to start judging more.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's assume that that's not an issue, because I think you can frame that well. If you're doing internal work on evaluating yourself and COVID and everything else, I think people get a lot of grace there. But let's assume you didn't have to work. How would your partner feel about that? Would she psychologically wonder what the heck you do all day, or would she be happy for you? Because she was supposed to go first in your scenario.
Right. So far, she's been very supportive. You don't have to work. Don't feel like you have to go get something. I wouldn't. She says I wouldn't. So she's been very supportive now. 6 months goes by and she's still getting up early and I'm sleeping until 10 a.m. That might change, but which is one of the reasons why I still get up and keep my routine. But yeah, she's been supportive.
Good. Do you think you're ready for not work? Did you lose what would get you out of bed every day if you didn't have to work and she was still working?
No, I think I want something. I need something is what I've determined.
Why?
It'd give me purpose. I went to an interview today and was able to do it face to face, got dressed up. I miss that is what I've decided. So
I'm going to go back to Shawshank Redemption. Do you miss that because it's familiar?
It is familiar and it gives you a sense of purpose, kind of makes you feel a little bit important, and the interaction, because I'm not getting any interaction here at home. So just that alone, just the interview is nice interaction, which is kind of sad, but.
Well, it's hard to have. It's hard to have nowadays other than Zoom just because of COVID.
Right.
It gives you a sense of purpose. I get that. Where do you think the satisfaction comes from? Is it from the affirmation and acknowledgement of doing things and having people notice it? Or where does it come from, you think?
I think, having people recognize your worth. I think that's the thing.
And that's a little bit of the corporate culture, which you've been in, right? Of annual reviews or quarterly reviews, projects, acknowledgements, bonuses, some monetary, some non-monetary. That's sort of the system, right? It's like the military in that sense.
Yeah.
Well, do you think your worth is beyond that? Obviously it is, but do you feel like it is?
Not right now, no. No.
Can you remind me your age is right now?
51.
51. So you're super young because I'm 53. And you were planning on retiring at 55. Do you think if you had gotten to 55, you would have figured that worth part out to be able to leave?
Yeah, because it would have been on my own terms. And so I could have said, okay, thank you. I had a great career. Thank you. I'm leaving now. You're not going to tell me when to leave. I'm leaving with all of that worth.
So some of this is about being acted upon rather than acting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I get that. Even if you had acted when you retired, you wouldn't have the routine. You wouldn't have the acknowledgement and the affirmation that you're used to. So do you think just because of acting first, it would have figured that out easier, or is it just the shock of everything?
The shock, and also my spouse would have been retired at that time too. So it would have been both of us and we'd be jet setting around. Now it's me in my spare bedroom of my office looking for jobs.
So you two would have been so busy with those initial bucket list items that it would have sort of filled the gap.
Right.
Okay. I get that. So let's assume, and we'll find out tomorrow for the most part, and then in our work privately, that you don't have to work. So you still think you're going to want to do something while she's working just to sort of give you that in between?
I think so.
Okay.
For transition.
That makes sense. So then with the assumption that you don't have to work, does that change what it is you would do? Because do you want to jump back into the corporate environment?
Sometimes. But as time goes on, no, I'd like to do something fun, something different.
So if it wasn't about the money, could it be Starbucks as an example, or whatever your equivalent of halfway fun?
Yeah.
You'll be okay without the title and the real compensation that you're used to.
Yeah, I think once I get past the
Okay.
the pride.
Yeah, that's hard. And it's that being acted upon by your family in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
That stings. Yeah. As I'm thinking, as we're talking, I actually just got a text, and I don't normally have my phone with me, but from Dan Crosby, who's a behavioral finance expert. And I was like, man, Dan should be talking because he really understands this from a thinking through perspective of the psychology of everything, because of what you're dealing with is very normal, just so you know. And what I find it is interesting, Trish, is even with those that had acted and weren't acted upon, they underestimate once they get beyond the initial rush of running around, in this case with Lynn, doing all this stuff, and then they get into a normal rhythm of life without work, they start to, what's my routine? Why am I getting up in the morning? And what is my purpose? How am I going to continue to grow as a person? They still end up struggling with all those things, maybe just not as forced as it is with you right now. So you'll still have to deal with those things, which I think can be a cool personal journey once you get over the shock of everything. Okay. So what are you doing to take care of yourself, knowing that you've basically had this wound inflicted upon you?
What am I doing to take care of myself? Well, I'm still calling my buddies and complaining about it. And they're complaining about it too.
That's good to a point, right?
Right. And then I still will get up in the morning and run. I usually find my day goes better if I do some kind of physical exercise that I have been used to. And then my day goes better if I have lunch with somebody, or even if I talk to somebody on the phone or have video chat or something, some kind of social stimulus throughout the day.
Yeah, definitely. I think getting your foxhole buddies around you for sure, right? That will help give you perspective, because a lot of it is the perspective of you're still going to have a great life. All of this, you're still going to have an amazing life. And we can lose that when we're pissed and we feel like we got to figure it out. You may look back at this as one of the best things that's ever happened.
That's what people keep on saying. I don't see it yet.
You don't have to see it yet. You don't have to see it yet. One thing that might be helpful, whenever I've had trauma of some sort, especially psychologically, I would journal. And I don't journal normally, but I have a few that I have to lock in a safe because I don't want anybody to read them, because they're like me screaming into the page. Maybe it'd help just to get it all out and scream. I mean, you can tell I'm screaming just by the handwriting and the amount of ink from the pressure on the pen and everything else. But I think getting those kind of outlets would be helpful. Well, I appreciate you sharing this, because a lot of people are dealing with the same things. In normal times, being acted upon rather than doing something proactive. Those things happen in jobs all the time. It's all corporate-y decisions, who falls below the line. And then COVID just accelerated all that. Most people don't talk about it, especially publicly. And although Trish isn't your real name, you have no idea how much this helps people, I think. Because just knowing that it's normal, I appreciate that.
Good.
You're going to have a good life, right?
That's what they tell me. Not quite there yet, but...
Well, you do affirm that you'll have a great life. It will happen, right? It's just what do you next. And so tomorrow night, you're going to be live with hundreds, but your face won't be on, so don't worry about that. And we're just going to walk through the financial part of it. And I think maybe this will help frame the financial part of it. Is that a big part too of the insecurity of like, you're not sure if this is all going to work?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that makes you feel like I don't have enough energy, meaning resources, to actually tread water. So maybe we can solve that for you and help give the perspective of, one, do you have enough money? And then if not, what's the next step to make sure it all works? So we should be able to get through most of that tomorrow. And then we'll have lots of listeners that are in all different situations, able to ask questions, and I'll facilitate. You won't have to talk to anybody. And then we'll start to give you guys that perspective. So I'll do my best to help.
Sounds good.
So I'm excited to have BW, our head retirement coach in the Rock Retirement Club, with us. Mr. W, how are you? How are you?
Great, Roger.
And I know you've had a chance to listen to my conversation with Trish on the non-financial stuff. And we used the metaphor about getting thrown in the water and trying to keep your head above water. When I think about Trish, I feel like she's in that mode of just grabbing for anything in terms of the zest to look for a job and to prove something. What was your impression of the conversation with Trish?
Yeah, I agree with that, Roger. I think Trish should slow down and really be purposeful.
Breathe.
Exactly. She's in a rush. She has some fear about replacing the income, but also she spoke of a hole in her resume if she took a little more time off. And I was thinking, Trish, you've worked 29 years straight. It's okay. Take a breath. As you say, breathe. And Roger, to borrow a phrase I hear you use a lot, what does this make possible?
Yeah. And it's hard to get to that. The way it's framed that I heard was she's angry and fearful because of this huge change that she didn't get to choose. And it's hard to answer that question or even ask that question when you're in that state.
Sure. She's been at this 29 years. She felt like she could go out on her own terms, and now she can't. And I think the sooner she can put behind her these feelings of anger, of hostility, I think was a term she used, I think she'll be better off if she can start thinking more positively about the rest of her life and what she really wants to do next. Right now, it seems like she's acting as though she needs to do something next. And I want her to take a breath, take a beat.
So how do you start getting out of that funk? Because those are natural reactions that are part of a grieving process. So how do you start to get yourself out of that and not get stuck there?
Yeah, part of it is make sure you are talking to people who will feed your feelings of positivity. In other words, don't dwell in the negative with people. She said her wife was as angry as she is, and I get that. And I'm sure her wife was being very supportive, but they both need to sort of look ahead, think about what their lives can be. If they're both going to be retired in a few years, and by retired, I mean from their main careers, it doesn't mean they won't do something meaningful, whether they get paid for it or not.
Yeah, and I think as a spouse too, it's you want to affirm and share some of the anger, but you also have a role to play, don't you, as far as ballast?
Yeah, exactly. It's point out the positives. And it sounds like Trish was getting some of that because she said, well, she told me I don't have to go back to work. And so probably Trish was dwelling in her own anger for a bit. And that's fine. But now it's time to look ahead. And I just think she's got some great opportunities. I would say, look at what some interests you have, personal or professional, that you've always wanted to pursue but didn't. And figure out what will make you the most happy. And then if you want to make some money doing that, make some money doing it. But more importantly, fill your days with things that you find meaningful.
And right now, she talked about it's 8 hours a day looking for a job to prove something, right? And which is, I guess, a replacement. But you talk about there are some core things we get from work that need to be replaced when we leave our full-time careers. And for her, she was institutionalized for 29 years. What are the things that she needs to replace?
Yeah, when we talk about what do you get from work, we talk about 5 things, and she ticked off 3 or 4 of them, didn't she? She was obviously the money side she was thinking about, but then the more important ones, if you really listen to her, she was talking about a sense of utility. Am I useful to people? That's something she wants with a job. She talked about a sense of status or significance. That's another thing we get from our jobs, and she needs to replace those things. And then the big one for her is purpose. It almost seemed like she was looking what jobs are open and I'm going to see what I can fill, instead of what job do I want or what job can I recreate for myself. I think she'd be better off doing that.
Do you think it's hard to do that until you have some clarity that financially you're okay, that you have the power position to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got to get that fear that you don't have enough behind you. And hopefully you can do that. You've talked with her about her financial situation. And
tomorrow we have the big reveal of hopefully giving her that perspective. I thought at the end of our conversation that might help the dynamic. It's a money thing, but it's really a psychological thing too.
Yeah. And too often when people are faced with a layoff like this, they have some severance. She got a nice severance package. She needs to feel allowed to use that and to let that buy her the time that she needs to find something that she really wants to do next.
Yeah. And I imagine part of that, I know we had the Encore book study in the club, is re-identifying what your worth is in the marketplace from a career capital, because she has a lot of skills that she's probably unaware of because she was in the same company for so long.
Right.
Rather than just leaping into the next thing.
I talk to clients about life balance and really think about that in your post 50 careers. And if you've been spending too much of your life energy on the career and on work, think about what is the right balance for you. It's different for each of us, but you need to really do a self-examination there and figure out how much time do I want to devote to work, to my relationships with my friends and family and myself. She talked about running. I was glad to hear that. I don't know if she's got any other sort of health goals that she has, but let's make sure we get life balance right. I think that's so important when we're in our second career.
I tell you, I've had some of the fastest times running and on my bike when I was pissed. And I could go longer too. It's amazing how much energy you can channel.
That's right.
And so a lot of people are dealing with these accelerations. How do you manage that? And I guess there's a couple ways. Obviously, I think getting the financial clarity to know you have runway or that you're okay stops you from reaching for anything, right? But how do you navigate that loss of agency? And it sort of seemed like that was some of it. It wasn't me doing it. Somebody did this to me.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about that. I think the way you can maybe get past that is to take control and to take agency over what you're going to do next. And that was something I really sensed Trish wasn't doing yet. She was still letting what happened to her drive what she's doing next. She's up every day. She gets dressed. She sits at her desk for 8 hours and looks for jobs and applies for jobs. And I just want to think, no, Trish, make this about you.
Don't try to get back into the boat that just tossed you. Go figure out where you're at and go find your cruise ship.
Exactly.
The ship that you want to be in. And obviously there's a lot more to it than this, but Trish shared part of her story and I think ultimately she'll get there. And it sounds like she has a lot of gumption to direct it. She has a lot of energy and she's a doer for sure, because it's just a matter of where it's directed ultimately.
Young. She's 51. So I like the idea that she realizes she wants to keep contributing. And that's important, whether or not it's at a full-time career earning what she earned before. You know, a lot of us get stuck in our heads. I think, oh, I made a lot of money. And now if I don't make that, I'm not as worthy or as useful. And that's just not the case. So that would be my advice. One
question I have for you, for everybody, when we lose a lot of these functions of work, social purpose, all that other stuff, how do we recreate that in the era of COVID, where you may not be able to get out and build that social network other than online, which generally leads to poorer conversations?
Yeah, we've all had to make changes this year, haven't we? Hopefully we can see the end, right? The end is in sight, at least. It may take us another year to fully get there, but at least we can see the end in sight now, I think, and that will help a lot. But I think, look, one thing we've got now is we all have a shared experience. So when you talk about relationships and maybe making new acquaintances, we all have this shared year that we just went through, and maybe that can form the basis of some new friendships.
Another thing I just thought of as you were talking that could help on the friendship end of it, but also on the perspective, is one of the best ways to get out of rut is to go help other people, whether it's volunteering or coaching. When you're helping other people, it tends to start moving forward.
It pays you as much as it helps them, doesn't it?
Oh, it totally does.
No doubt about that. One thought is if you had some close work friends before who are in the same boat as you are now, well, maybe you go out and you start something together, whether it's for pay, a new business, or whether it's a volunteer effort. That if you've got 2 or 3 really close friends that you enjoy, and sometimes maybe you've talked about some idea for years that you wanted to pursue. Well, now's maybe the chance to try that out.
I think the key here is, and it didn't sound like she was comfortable with it when I was saying it at the end, was saying to yourself, I am going to have a great life. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I am going to have a great life regardless.
Yeah.
But you definitely help a lot. And I appreciate all your work in the club and sharing your thoughts here, man.
Thank you.
On your marks, get set.
Here we are at the last Smart Sprint of the Retirement Plan Live series, and we've been focusing on the top regrets people have at the end of life. Now that can feel a little depressing, but it also can be very motivating because when we think of these regrets from wise people at the other end of a journey that we are on, we're on the same journey, and to get feedback from them about what they wish they would have done. That can be really powerful. No different than if you were thinking of going to Italy and you want to talk to people that have gone there before to get their perspective. So we can take advantage of the opportunities and avoid some of these risks, which are regrets. The number 4 regret that we're going to talk about this week is I wish I had let myself be happier. I wish I would have let myself be happier. Happy is a weird word. What is happy? Over the years, we've had some experts on happiness, and we've talked about the topic. I don't know if happiness is really the goal of life. Happy is a byproduct of a life well lived, I think, a product of looking at what we're doing and have done and being proud. I don't think happy is an end in any way. This is at least my opinion on it. When I think of myself, when am I happiest? I am happiest when I am intentional and feel like I'm living my values. That's when I feel happiest, most satisfied, is when I'm living my values. So I'm looking at my values frame here. Positive attitude. I'm happy when I have a positive attitude. I'm happy when I feel like I have quality relationships. I'm happy when I feel fit, when I'm exercising. I'm happy when I have a bit of adventure in my life. And adventure doesn't have to be epic mountain bike trips. Adventure could be learning to play a guitar or harmonica. I think that's when I feel happiest, when I feel like I'm living my values and I'm being intentional about it. When I'm most unhappy is when I feel like I'm not. I feel like I'm just mailing it in. And so I wish I let myself be happier with that phrase. And I'm just talking for me. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. Let myself be happier. Let myself is the key phrase in that. And I wonder if that was really verbatim what they heard a lot in the studies where they found these regrets. For me, that's definitely, I tend to want to move forward so I don't let myself celebrate. And that was one of my key words for the year a couple of years ago, celebrate, because I always looked at what needed to be fixed. And so maybe that's a part of it, of acknowledging all the cool things that you're doing and not downplaying those so much. So I'm curious what it means to you. By the way, if you want to receive a summary of the show, but also links to some articles and resources that we create from time to time, we do that every Saturday morning in an email called 6 Shot Saturday. And you can get access to that for free at rogerwhitney.com. But just put in your name and your email, and we'll send you an email every Saturday with the show, as well as resources that we mention. Hope you have a great week. Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize this is helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.